The hum deepened, not the familiar thrum of the alien vessel, but a deeper, resonant pulse that vibrated through the deck plating and up your very spine. It was the sound of a colossal heart slowing, preparing for an age-long sleep. You stood, rigid, watching as the last of the Cathar, their multi-jointed forms sleek and silent, glided towards their crystalline sleep chambers. Their multifaceted eyes, usually glowing with cold, impartial logic, now held a faint, almost pitying light as they turned. One raised a digit, pointing to the empty stasis pod reserved for you, for asterisk all of you. A voice, synthesized and unnervingly calm, echoed through the vast chamber. The long slumber awaits, designated HUMAN-7. Prepare for transition. Centuries will pass as mere moments. But you didn't move. No one did. Beside you, Alara's hand was a white-knuckled grip on the worn fabric of her jacket. Across the makeshift camp, a flicker of orange light danced, a defiant spark in the rapidly dimming hall. It was the unauthorized but highly efficient biofuel stove, already starting to glow with a steady warmth. The air, already thin and cold from the Cathar's energy-saving protocols, carried a faint, distinct tang. Wood smoke. The voice repeated, this time with a subtle edge of mechanical insistence. Compliance is mandatory. Non-compliance jeopardizes mission parameters. A low thrum intensified, and a specialized Cathar unit, designed for handling unforeseen variables, began to activate. Its metallic frame hummed, manipulator arms extending with a soft hydraulic hiss. It wasn't built for aggression, you knew, but for points hurture. Points for containment. For enforcement. Your heart pounded. A frantic drum against your ribs. A primal rhythm in the growing silence. The cold was seeping into your bones, but it wasn't just the ship's dropping temperature. It was the chill of stark, terrifying isolation. You were choosing to face the void awake. You were choosing to asterisk feel every one of those centuries, every endless moment of the journey. That was the fear. Not of dying, but of living too long, too alone, in the profound, alien dark. But beneath that fear, a stubborn ember glowed, hotter than the stove. A defiant, resounding no. You met the Cathar unit's unblinking optical sensors. We don't hibernate, you said, your voice rough, unnaturally loud in the suddenly cavernous chamber. We adapt. Alara stepped forward, a simple, heavy wrench gripped loosely in her hand, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of human ingenuity. She gestured to the biofuel stove, now merrily crackling. The wood smoke a defiant plume in the sterile, circulating air. This isn't just about survival, she added, her voice shaky but firm. It's about being present. The Cathar unit paused, its internal processors whirring, trying to reconcile the data. A species that refused biological preservation for a multi-century journey? It was an anomaly beyond their logical framework. An absurdity. But it was your absurdity now. The Cathar overseer, still poised at the entrance of its stasis pod, emitted a soft, almost imperceptible clicking sound. A Cathar sigh of resignation, or perhaps a final chilling warning. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of the Cathar's stasis gas beginning to cycle through the general environment, meant to gently induce sleep, even for those not in pods. But for you, it just made your head swim, a metallic tang coating your tongue. And beneath it, the comforting, defiant scent of burning wood, of something live and warm. Your comrades around you, dozens of faces illuminated by the flickering stove light, were pale, their eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. But none of them looked away. None of them moved towards the empty, waiting pods. You felt the ship's power grid shift, a deep, stomach-lurching plunge as non-essential systems powered down. The constant, dull ache in your stomach has become a familiar companion, a quiet, insistent thrum that matches the low, almost imperceptible hum of the ancient Cathar vessel. It's been years now, perhaps decades, since the last of them sealed themselves away. Time blurs in this artificial twilight, marked only by the dwindling stores and the deepening lines around your companions' eyes. The metallic tang in your mouth, a perpetual reminder of nutrient paste and recycled water, is almost a comfort in its predictability. You lift the small, translucent pouch, squeezing the last remnants of today's ration onto your finger. It tastes bland, slightly chalky, but it's fuel. It's life. Ilara sits opposite you, meticulously wiping down a modified circuit board with a salvaged cloth. Her movements are economical, every action measured. "Half a unit of green slurry for the morning, Cap," she murmurs, not looking up. "We're pushing it tighter than ever." You nod, the thought of the morning's meager meal already a hollow promise. The initial adrenaline of defiance, the pure, raw triumph of choosing wakefulness, has long since given way to the grind of sheer, unyielding survival. You remember the Cathar, their efficient, cold logic dictating perfectly preserved rations for sleeping bodies. They never factored in the ravenous metabolism of 100 active humans, consuming, processing, kloops living, for centuries. The ship's automated systems, once so abundant, have dwindled to the barest essentials, barely keeping the breathable air cycling and a minimum of heat in your small, improvised habitat. The rest of the colossal vessel is a tomb of frozen silence, a ghost ship sailing through the void. A sharp clang echoes from the next compartment. Jax, ever the engineer, wrestling with another recalcitrant hydroponics unit. You feel a flicker of tension, a tightening in your chest. Those units are precious, painstakingly repurposed from Cathar waste recyclers, coaxed into growing the barest hints of edible plant life. Each leaf, each sprout is a victory against the void. "How's Jax doing with the water reclamation?" you ask, your voice a little hoarser than you'd like. Ilara sighs, a thin sound in the quiet. "He's got it running, but output is down. The filters are tired. Like us." She finally looks up. Her eyes, once bright with the fire of rebellion, now hold a weary resignation, but also that stubborn, unyielding spark. "We found another stash of Cathar nutrient bricks in Sector Gamma, though. Deep storage. They're inedible to us, of course. But Jax thinks he can break them down. Rebuild them into something less awful." Your mind immediately starts calculating the energy cost, the hours of labor, the potential for failure. It's a gamble. Always a gamble. Every resource is a finite, terrifying countdown. You press your lips together. The taste of scarcity, a bitter truth. The constant, gnawing question, how much longer? How much longer can you stretch the dwindling stores, the failing equipment, the human spirit? You stand, moving towards the hydroponics bay. Jax is indeed hunched over a sputtering pump, his face smeared with grease and desperation. "Still at it, old man?" you say, trying for levity. He grunts, pulling at a jammed valve. "Still at it. This beast hates us, Cap. It wants us to starve quietly, like good little Cathar." "And what do we do?" you ask, leaning against the cold metal bulkhead, the faint vibration of the failing pump, a constant reminder of the fight. Jax finally frees the valve, a gush of murky water spilling onto the floor before he quickly caps it. He straightens up, wiping his hands on his overalls. He looks at you, his eyes bloodshot but determined. "We don't starve quietly," he says, his voice raspy but clear. "We make this junk work. We'll eat dirt if we have to, and then we'll figure out how to make the dirt taste good." The hunger gnaws, yes. The cold creeps in. The biting, cloying stench of rendering fat clung to your clothes, your skin, even the back of your throat. It was the smell of survival, and after decades of this long, dark journey, it was the smell of home. The flickering yellowish glow cast by the crude tallow lamps barely pushed back the ship's oppressive gloom, turning the vast, alien corridors into an endless series of dancing shadows. Cold seeped into your bones from the metal deck plating, a constant companion that only the raw, messy heat of the rendering station could temporarily banish. You pressed a hand to your forehead, wiping away a sheen of grease and sweat. The tyranny of tallow, that's what Jax called it. "Another batch done, Cap," Ilara said, her voice raspy from the dry air, as she ladled the thick, yellow liquid into crude ceramic molds. Her face, illuminated by the guttering flame, was smudged with soot, her eyes tired but focused. Almost enough for the east wing's rotation. If we're lucky, we might even keep the comm station lamp burning through the night cycle. You watched the molten fats slowly harden, a greasy film coating the entire processing area. It was an arduous, never-ending task. The Cathar, with their bioluminescent internal systems and preference for total stasis, never bothered with portable light sources. So you had to invent your own. Years ago, Jax, with his incredible knack for repurposing, had discovered a way to extract usable fats from the alien nutrient bricks, those unpalatable blocks the Cathar had packed for their own biological processes, never meant for active human consumption. What started as a desperate experiment to provide some minimal light in the endless dark had become the backbone of your daily existence. The dim, wavering light forced you to rely on touch and sound. Every misplaced tool, every unseen obstacle, became a potential hazard. Your eyes constantly strained, aching with the effort. You felt a dull throbbing behind your temples, a familiar headache that only sleep, deep, uninterrupted sleep, a luxury you rarely indulged in, could truly alleviate. But sleep meant darkness. And darkness after so long was a terror all its own. "Have any of the recon teams found anything else?" you asked, your voice cutting through the soft sizzle of the cooling tallow. "Something cleaner?" Ilara let out a short, humorless laugh. "Only more empty chambers, Cap, more stasis pods. More of that weird, inert cud of dust. It's like they stripped this ship bare before they went to sleep, just to spite us." She scraped the last of the rendered fat into a mold, her movements practiced and efficient. "We've got the next rendering session scheduled for dawn. Jax is already prepping the biological matter he scavenged from Sector Delta." Sector Delta. That meant another long, dangerous trek through the ship's freezing, pitch-black lower decks, where Cathar emergency protocols occasionally flared, bathing corridors in blinding alien light before plunging them back into darkness. But the material found there was rich in fats, making it worth the risk. It always was. A sudden, sharp pain flared in your hand. You'd inadvertently brushed against the hot metal of the rendering pot. You pulled your hand back, a small hiss escaping your lips. A fresh blister was already forming, a constant reminder of the hazards of your improvised, archaic existence. You pressed your lips together, fighting the urge to curse the Cathar, curse the ship, curse the endless darkness that forced you to this. But then, the flicker of a newly solidified candle caught your eye. It wasn't much, just a fragile, dancing flame, barely brighter than a star seen from a deep space. Yet it was your light. It was human vessel, wrenched from an alien vessel, a beacon against the unfathomable black. You weren't hibernating. You were enduring. You were creating. The silence. It pressed in, heavy and cold. A constant weight after decades aboard the Cathar vessel. It was the sound of a dead ship, carrying a few stubborn living things. Until now. A faint, rhythmic clunk. Distant, almost imperceptible at first. It was there. It broke the perfect, oppressive quiet that had become your world. You froze, your hand pausing mid-air as you reached for another tallow lamp, your breath catching in your throat. Ilara, across the makeshift common area, lifted her head, her eyes wide, mirroring the question in your own. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely louder than the new, unsettling pulse. You nodded, your heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against your ribs. It wasn't the creak of settling metal, nor the groan of a dying system. This was mechanical, deliberate, and entirely alien to the inert vessel you had come to know. It sounded like something Taimo moving, deep within the ship's skeletal structure, far below your living quarters. A cold dread seeped into your bones, colder than the ship's perpetually low temperature. You hadn't seen a functioning Cathar system beyond the barest life support since they all slipped into stasis. The idea that something else was awake, something else was active, after all this time, was a terrifying proposition. Are you truly alone? Or have you been sharing this silent tomb with an unseen entity, a dormant program that only now, after centuries, decided to stir? Grab your lamp. And your wrench. You ordered, your voice steadier than you felt. You weren't going to hide. Not now. Not after everything. The Cathar went to sleep to avoid the long night. You chose to face it. The journey through the ship's vast, abandoned corridors was a study in profound silence, broken only by your own ragged breathing, the soft scuff of your boots, and that relentless, distant clunk. Your tallow lamp cast a dancing, flickering circle of weak light, making the endless metal pathways seem to writhe with monstrous shadows. Each step echoed unnaturally, swallowed quickly by the vastness. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of stagnant metal and ozone. Every nerve ending screamed at you to turn back, to hide in the familiar cramped safety of your habitat. But the curiosity, the primal need to know, drove you forward. The sound grew louder as you descended through access shafts and navigated forgotten service tunnels. It seemed to come from directly beneath an old Cathar data archive, a place you'd always avoided because of its sheer, oppressive scale and the lingering chill of ancient energy fields. The rhythmic clunk was now a visceral thrum, vibrating through the decking, a low, grinding growl that made your teeth ache. You finally reached a massive bulkhead, its alien symbols faded into obscurity. The sound was deafening here, a relentless, mechanical heartbeat. Ilara pressed her ear against the cold metal. It's some kind of power conduit, Cap," she shouted over the noise. "But it's not hooked to anything. It's just cycling, over and over, like it forgot to stop." You stared at the vibrating wall, the noise of physical assault. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a rogue alien program. It was just a machine, one of the Cathar's ancient systems, powering up uselessly, wasting energy, making noise in the long, dark night. It was a phantom limb of the ship, twitching blindly. The relief was immediate, a rush of cold air filling your lungs, chasing away the phantom menace. But then, a new thought solidified. "How long has it been doing this?" you muttered, more to yourself than Ilara. "And how much power is it drawing?" Ilara's face was grim in the dim light. "Enough to drain whatever reserve batteries it's tied into. Enough to eventually shut down something we need." The fear hadn't vanished entirely. It had simply shifted, evolved. From the terror of the unknown to the gnawing anxiety of the preventable, the biting cold in your fingertips had moved beyond mere discomfort years ago. Now, it was a dull, constant ache, a companion as familiar as the perpetual dimness of the Cathar vessel. Your breath, a faint cloud, hung in the frigid air of the fabrication chamber as you leaned closer to the sputtering tallow lamp. Its meager warmth, a mockery against the bone-deep chill. You flexed your hands, the tendons protesting, before picking up the alien fiber spool, a relic of the Cathar's automated systems, repurposed by Jax into something resembling thread. It was tough, oddly resilient, and utterly unforgiving on human skin. Each precise stitch, each intricate knot, was a battle against the creeping numbness. You were patching another thermal undersuit, one of the few remaining from your original stores. The ship's internal temperature had continued its slow, merciless descent since the Cathar slumbered, turning vast sections into frozen tombs. Your primary habitat was barely maintained, and venturing into the colder zones for scavenged materials meant risking frostbite, even with the improvised thermal gear. So you patched, you mended, you wove. The needle, salvaged and sharpened, felt like a sliver of ice in your aching fingers. You pushed it through the coarse, dark alien fabric, the resistance palpable. Thills, thump, click. The sounds echoed in the quiet. The only accompaniment, the faint hum of the distant, struggling life support. Your eyes, strained by the poor light, focused intently on the intricate pattern of the tear, a jagged rip near the elbow. This wasn't just a repair. It was an act of stubborn defiance against the creeping cold, against the inevitable. "Almost done with that one, Cap?" Ilara's voice cut through the silence, making you jump slightly. She entered the chamber, rubbing her hands together. A new bundle of alien insulation material clutched under her arm. Jax found more of that dense reclamation foam in Section Gamma. He thinks we can process it for another few yards of sheeting. You grunted, pulling the thread taut, a sharp pain shooting through your thumb. "Yeah, almost. This alien stuff is a nightmare to work with. But it holds heat like a dream." You looked at the new material. It looked even stiffer, more brittle than the last batch. Another round for the Great Blanket Project? Ilara nodded, a weary smile touching her lips. The children are still getting too cold at night, even with the triple layers. We need to insulate the sleep pods better. The children, the very reason you refused stasis, the living, breathing future that depended on every painful stitch, every shivering journey for supplies, every flickering tallow lamp. They couldn't sleep away their lives. And neither could you. Your fingers were shaking now, not just from the cold, but from the sheer exhaustion of fine motor work in these conditions. The material was alien, the tools crude, the light dim, and the cold was your constant, unyielding enemy. You could feel the warmth seeping away from your skin, even here, near the processing station. You could imagine the sensation of frostbite, the slow, insidious creep of numbness that led to something worse. But the suit was almost done. One more pass. You clenched your jaw, pushing the needle through, guiding the thread with a precision that belied the trembling of your hands. The fabric yielded, finally. A small, ragged victory. You held up the mended suit. It wasn't pretty, scarred with patches and uneven stitching, but it was whole. It would protect. It would provide warmth. It was a testament to human ingenuity, to the sheer, stubborn will to keep building, keep repairing, keep fighting, even when your fingers were numb with the cold and your spirit was tired. The frozen fingers of the weaver might ache, might sting, but they would not stop, not until the warmth of home, however distant, was finally reached. The heavy drape of the newly finished blanket settled over your shoulders, a coarse, slightly scratchy weight that was, paradoxically, a comfort. It smelled faintly of the recycled alien fibers, a clean, almost sterile scent that was worlds away from the oppressive tallow smoke of the fabrication chamber. The chill of the Cathar vessel still seeped into your bones, but beneath this hand-stitched warmth, a tiny pocket of defiance against the void had been carved out. You closed your eyes for a moment, savoring the feeling, the sheer, undeniable reality of something punctured my times for human hands, for human warmth, in this cold, indifferent expanse. Ilara sat beside you, her own fingers deftly sorting through a pile of salvaged insulation, preparing it for the next round of processing. "It's enough for young Finn," she said softly, her voice low. "His cough has been worse these last few cycles." You nodded, the image of Finn's small, shivering form flashing in your mind. The children. They were the reason for every aching joint, every strained eye, every blistered finger. They were the raw, beating heart of your impossible journey. This blanket, rough as it was, wasn't just woven from repurposed alien threads. It was woven from every sleepless night, every desperate scrounge, every stubborn refusal to surrender to the cold and the dark. It carried the weight of a promise. "It's not wool, is it?" you murmured, half to yourself, running your hand over the alien weave. You remembered the feel of true wool, from Earth, a distant memory of soft, organic warmth, a luxury unimaginable now. But it's ours, and it holds the heat. A small, quiet sniffle came from across the common area. It was Lena, barely 5 cycles old, trying to be brave, but her small shoulders still trembled in the perpetual twilight. She hugged a worn, patched, stuffed animal, her breath pluming softly. The ship's automated heating, designed for Cathar biologies, was barely sufficient for you, and for the children, it was a constant, insidious threat. You stood, the blanket draped over your arm, feeling its improbable mass. It felt heavier than it should, burdened not just by its physical density, but by the hopes and fears of 100 souls. You walked towards Lena, her eyes wide as you approached. She didn't flinch, accustomed to your large, shadowy form in the dimness. "Here, Lena," you said, your voice softening, trying to smooth the rasp from years of dry, recycled air. You knelt, gently unfolding the blanket and wrapping it around her small frame. The alien fibers, warmed by your body heat, radiated a sudden comforting glow that pushed back the chill. Lena burrowed into it, her small face disappearing for a moment before peeking out, a faint, shy smile gracing her lips. "It's warm," she whispered, her voice tiny, but full of genuine awe. Her shivering eased, replaced by the slow, even breathing of a child finally finding comfort. Ilara watched from her station, a rare, genuine smile touching her lips. You could feel it too, a warmth spreading through your chest that had nothing to do with the blanket's insulation. It was the heat of connection, of shared purpose, of a simple, profound act of human compassion in the face of overwhelming odds. It wasn't wool, it wasn't soft, but this hand-stitched warmth, this crude alien fiber blanket, felt like the most precious thing in the universe. It was the weight of a promise kept, the profound, undeniable truth that even in the coldest, darkest reaches of space, humans would always find a way to keep each other warm. The sharp, clean sting of supercooled air burned your nostrils with every breath, a shock after decades of the recycled metallic tang you'd grown accustomed to. Each step sent a brittle crunch echoing through the vast, cathedral-like chamber, a sound utterly alien to the metallic groans and hums of the rest of the Cathar vessel. You gripped the modified ice pick in your gloved hand, its recycled alloy head gleaming faintly in the beam of your headlamp. This wasn't just a new section of the ship, it was another world, a snowy wood formed from the ship's own decaying essence. Ice. It was everywhere, not soft powdery snow, but jagged crystalline formations that sprouted from fractured conduits like frozen trees, spanning the immense space. Delicate, shimmering webs of rime clung to everything, transforming familiar alien technology into glittering, dangerous sculptures. The silence here was different too. Not the heavy, oppressive silence of dormant machines, but a profound, deep quiet, broken only by your own movements and the distant, mournful whistle of the wind-like draft sighing through unseen vents. It was beautiful, in a terrifying, deadly way. "Easy, Cap," Ilara whispered, her voice tight, a plume of vapor escaping her lips. She moved with cautious precision, her own lamp cutting through the gloom, highlighting the treacherous, slick floor. "Jax thinks this is where the primary atmospheric scrubbers finally ruptured. All that moisture just froze." You nodded, your gaze sweeping across the eerie landscape. You were searching for specific crystalline deposits, formed from rare minerals within the ship's structure. Minerals that Jax believed could act as a catalyst for a new, more efficient power source. A desperate, long-shot hope for your dwindling energy reserves. But getting to them meant navigating this frozen labyrinth, where a single misstep could send you plummeting into invisible chasms, or trigger an unstable icefall. The cold was insidious. Despite your thick, patched thermal gear, you felt it gnawing at your fingers and toes. Your face ached, and your eyelashes felt stiff with rime. You pressed your lips together, the taste of dry, icy air filling your mouth. Every instinct screamed danger, but the knowledge that your people, your children, depended on this desperate scavenger hunt pushed you onward. Suddenly, a faint topping echoed from your comms unit, startlingly loud in the profound quiet. "Cap! Ilara, did you just hear that?" Jax's voice, distorted by static, cut through. "Reading an anomalous energy signature. Deep in your sector. It's faint, but it's asterisk active too." Your blood ran cold, a sharper, more visceral chill than the surrounding environment. An active signature? Here? After centuries of dead silence? You tightened your grip on the ice pick, your eyes scanning the glittering frozen forest. The silence of the snowy wood, once just beautiful and deadly, now held a new, terrifying edge. You weren't alone in this alien winter wonderland anymore. Not entirely. Your breath hitched. This was exactly what you didn't want to find. But you also knew, with a primal certainty, that you couldn't turn back. Not when something new was stirring. And humanity, after all this time, was still very much awake. The iron tang of blood filled your mouth, a coppery, sickening warmth that mingled with the freezing air. You pressed a gloved hand to your lip, feeling the slight split from a sudden, jarring slip on the treacherous ice. A minor injury, a common hazard in this crystalline wasteland. But then, another scent layered over it. Sharper, colder. A profound, wet metallic reek that wasn't your own. It was a smell you knew deeply. A primal warning. The air felt heavier, thicker. You weren't alone in this dead silence anymore, not with that scent hanging in the air. Cap? Elara? Did you just hear that? Jax's voice crackled over the comms, a thread of static beneath his urgency. Reading an anomalous energy signature, it just spiked. And there's movement. Fast movement. You froze, your headlamp beam cutting through the gloom, sweeping across the jagged ice formations. Every instinct screamed. This wasn't just a structural anomaly, or a phantom limb of a dying machine. This was something else. A faint scraping sound, like claws on ice, cut through the silence. Distant, then closer. You swung your headlamp, the beam piercing the overwhelming darkness, revealing a disturbance in the pristine rime ahead. A trail. Not human. Too many limbs. Too many drag marks. The blood smell was stronger here, almost overwhelming, clinging to the air like a shroud. And then you saw it. Or rather, the close remains of it. A Cathar maintenance drone, torn apart, its intricate workings splayed open like a grisly flower on the ice. Next to it, a glistening smear of thick, dark fluid, not unlike the coppery reek in your nostrils, but alien. Something had torn this machine apart. Something living. Before you could fully process it, a shadow detached itself from the crystalline pillars. Fast. Too fast. It was low to the ground. A multi-legged blur that seemed to glide effortlessly over the treacherous ice. Sleek, dark, adapted to the freezing conditions, its eyes glowed with a predatory, cold intelligence. It wasn't Cathar. It wasn't human. It was hungry, and it was looking at *U. Elara screamed, a raw, terrified sound. Cap, look out! The creature lunged, a flurry of razor-sharp limbs, moving with a speed that defied the frigid environment. You didn't think, you reacted. The modified ice pick, meant for mineral extraction, became a desperate weapon. You swung, aiming for the glowing eyes, feeling a jarring thud as recycled alloy met something unexpectedly hard. It let out a high-pitched shriek, a sound that grated on your teeth, and recoiled, leaving behind a fresh smear of that alien blood on the ice pick's blade. It was bigger than it looked, stronger. Its chitinous hide surprisingly resilient. But you had a brain. You had a will. You saw the ruptured conduits above, the unstable ice formations clinging precariously to the ceiling. Elara! The pressure valve! You yelled, pointing with your free hand, knowing she'd understand the desperate plan. She moved, a blur of motion, scrambling towards a corroded valve, her own modified wrench clutched tight. The creature paused, assessing, its alien gaze unsettling. It sensed the danger, but it was too slow. With a final, desperate heave, Elara twisted the valve. A violent hiss of pressurized, supercooled gas erupted, tearing through the crystal formation. The snowy wood shattered. Ice shards exploded outwards, ripping through the air like shrapnel. The creature shrieked again, a sound of agony this time, as it was engulfed by the sudden storm of ice and gas, slammed against a wall of fractured metal. It tried to scramble, but its movements were erratic, slowing. You watched it freeze, slowly, completely. Its predatory glow dimming until it was just another inert, grotesque sculpture in the swirling ice fog. You stood there, gasping, the reek of blood, ozone, and now, freezing gas, filling your lungs. Your hands trembled, but your grip on the ice pick was firm. The deep, resonant sea rack vibrated through the metal plating beneath your feet, a sound like a giant spine snapping, echoing in the vast, frozen chasm. It wasn't a distant groan this time, nor a localized shudder. This was a gut-wrenching, all-encompassing tremor that made your teeth clench and your heart leap into your throat. You instinctively braced yourself, your gloved hands gripping the modified ice pick so hard your knuckles ached. This was it. The structural integrity of the millennia-old Cathar vessel, stressed by centuries of neglect and the creeping expansionary power of ice, was finally giving way. You were halfway across the Bridge of Whispers, a precarious ice-covered catwalk spanning an abyss of fractured frozen machinery in Sector Omega. It was a route Jack swore held the key to a buried, high-yield Cathar power conduit. a lifeline for your fading habitat. But now, the bridge itself was betraying you. A cascade of smaller snaps followed the initial crack, like 1,000 brittle bones shattering. The ice under your boots shifted violently, groaning. You felt yourself pitching forward, a sickening lurch that sent a jolt of pure terror through your system. Your headlamp beam danced wildly, illuminating crystalline towers and jagged metal stalagmites plummeting into the blackness below. The cold air rushed past you, suddenly feeling like an icy fist. "Cap, hold on!" Ilara's shout was ragged, barely audible over the growing cacophony of breaking ice and groaning metal. She was a few feet behind you, clinging to a frozen handrail, her face pale, eyes wide with adrenaline-fueled fear. A huge chunk of the catwalk, just meters ahead of you, sheared away with a screech of tearing metal, tumbling into the abyss with a crash that seemed to vibrate through the entire ship. The bridge was collapsing. Your mind, honed by decades of improvisation and desperation, kicked into overdrive. You scanned your surroundings, frantically searching for purchase, for an anchor, for anything. Your eyes landed on a massive, ice-encrusted support beam jutting from the opposite wall, still firmly rooted. It was too far to jump, but Ilara, "Throw me your grappling line," you yelled, your voice strained, pushing against the fear that threatened to paralyze you. The ice under your feet was groaning again, spiderweb cracks spreading rapidly. You could feel the whole structure tilting, slowly, inexorably, towards the void. She reacted without hesitation, unhooking the compact, salvaged Cathar grappling line from her belt, and flinging it with surprising force. It spun end over end, the weighted hook arcing through the frigid air. Time seemed to stretch, agonizingly. It was a perfect throw. The hook snagged onto the support beam with a metallic clink. "I got it!" you roared, a surge of desperate hope flooding your chest. You secured the line to your own harness, feeling the rough weave of the repurposed alien material against your chest. But the bridge gave another violent lurch, a section beneath Ilara cracking ominously. Her handrail, too, was beginning to tear free from the crumbling bulkhead. "I can't hold on," she cried, her voice laced with panic. You didn't hesitate. With a primal roar, you leapt, trusting the grappling line, swinging across the widening chasm. Just as Ilara's section of the catwalk finally gave way, you grabbed her outstretched arm mid-air, feeling the sudden jarring weight of her body against yours. For a terrifying moment, you both swung precariously over the abyss, suspended by that single, slender line, the sound of cracking ice and tearing metal echoing beneath you. Your shoulder screamed in protest, your muscles burning, but you held fast, your knuckles white. This wasn't about strength now. It was about sheer, bloody-minded refusal to let go. You pulled, gritting your teeth, every fiber of your being focused on one thing: survival. The aching in your shoulder, the raw scrape of your lungs from the supercooled air, the phantom taste of your own blood, all of it faded, pushed back by the impossible sight that now unfolded before you. Beyond the jagged edge of the collapsed catwalk, where the Bridge of Whispers once stood, lay not just another abyss, but a vista of breathtaking, terrifying beauty. It was a frozen river, vast beyond anything you'd imagined, spanning the entire breadth of the enormous Cathar chamber. Not water, not exactly. This was a torrent of some ancient iridescent coolant, flash frozen in mid-flow, its surface a chaotic tapestry of glassy plains and jagged sapphire-blue spires. It shimmered under the faint, ethereal glow of distant, failing Cathar emergency lights, reflecting the gloom and the scattered light sources like a fractured alien sky. And right in the center, caught in the frozen current, a single, perfectly smooth shard of obsidian dark ice, reflecting a pure, impossible blue. A shard of sky on the river. You heard Ilara gasp beside you, a shaky sound. "By the void, Cap. What is this place?" Her eyes, wide with awe, stared at the glittering expanse. The profound silence of this sector was broken only by the faint crackle of ice, shifting under unseen pressures, a whisper-thin song that underscored the vastness. It was cold enough here that your breath plumed in heavy clouds, making the air taste crisp, almost metallic sweet with ozone. This was a beauty that could kill you in an instant, a silent, frozen leviathan, Jax. You murmured into your comms, the word feeling oddly small against the grand scale of the frozen river. You seeing this? A pause, then Jax's voice, hushed and full of raw wonder, crackled back. Affirmative, Cap. Spectroscopic analysis indicates it's a high-purity crystalline structure. And that shard in the middle, it's a focused light conductor. It's drawing power, a lot of it. He hesitated. That's it, Cap. That's our conduit. Whatever that coolant was connected to, that's where the power still lives, buried beneath all that ice. The air felt thick with possibility, a sudden, intoxicating rush of hope mingling with the ever-present danger. The power conduit. The lifeline you'd been risking everything for, hidden beneath a frozen river of alien beauty. To get to it, you'd have to cross that treacherous, shimmering expanse. One wrong step, one unseen fissure, and you'd be swallowed by the glittering abyss, frozen forever. The cold radiating from the ice was intense, a deep chill that promised to steal your warmth faster than anything before. You took a tentative step onto the frozen surface, your specialized boots crunching softly on the hard rime. The ice held. Each footfall was a gamble, each breath a silent prayer. You moved carefully, your eyes fixed on that shimmering shard of sky, now a beacon in the desolate beauty. It felt like walking on a dream, a fragile, deadly dream. You could feel the deep, resonating hum now, not just through your boots, but through the ice itself, a subtle vibration that promised the power Jax detected. Alara followed, her movements cautious, her eyes darting, assessing every shadow, every glittering peak. "We're really doing this, aren't we?" she whispered, a hint of something fierce in her voice. You just nodded, your gaze unwavering from the distant, glowing heart of your quest. The beauty here was brutal, indifferent. It didn't care that you were human, or that you needed its power to survive. But you cared. You were here, awake, defying the long sleep, finding the fragile beauty and the desperate hope in the very heart of the alien cold. You had risked everything to stay awake, and now you would risk everything to keep that light alive. A deep, steady hum vibrated through the floor plates, not the mournful, dying groan of the old Cathar systems, but a powerful, adult-alive thrum that permeated everything. And with it, a tangible, blessed warmth began to push back the bone-deep chill that had been your constant companion for centuries. You felt it first in your toes, a faint tingling sensation as blood finally rushed back, followed by your fingers, which slowly uncurled from their perpetual defensive clench. The knot in your shoulders, a permanent fixture for decades, began to loosen ever so slightly, a release of tension you hadn't realized you carried. The air, once thin and biting, now held a fresh, almost crisp quality, tinged with a faint, clean scent of ozone, the smell of raw power, newly harnessed. It was a stark contrast to the cloying tallow smoke and recycled metal you'd become so accustomed to. You stood in the newly designated Power Hub, once a Cathar auxiliary reactor core, now a buzzing nexus of human ingenuity. Jax, his face smeared with grease but his eyes alight with triumph, wiped his hands on his overalls. He stood next to the massive alien conduit you and Alara had risked life and limb to reach, now repurposed, stripped of its crystalline ice, and pulsing with a deep, blue-white glow. "She's purring, Cap," Jax announced, his voice hoarse but beaming. "Pulled the last of the bypasses, full stabilization. We've got sustainable power, real power this time." You reached out, cautiously touching the warm metal of a newly installed human conduit feeding off the Cathar core. It was warm, truly warm, not the feeble heat of a biofuel stove or the precarious flicker of a tallow lamp, but a steady, radiating comfort that promised life. Around you, the other engineers, their faces flushed with exertion and relief, cheered softly, a wave of tired triumph rippling through the cramped space. Then, the lights. Not the dim, struggling halogens you'd scavenged, nor the dancing shadows of tallow, but a bright, steady, clackly light that filled the chamber, pushing back centuries of gloom. It was almost painful to your light-starved eyes at first, but then, glorious. You could see the grime on the walls, the dust motes dancing in the air, the faint lines of exhaustion etched on your comrades' faces, and the unmistakable joy shining in their eyes. "Ilara, how's the habitat?" you asked into your comms, your voice thick with emotion. You could already imagine the transformation. Her reply was immediate, clear, and vibrant, devoid of the static and strain you'd grown used to. "Cap, it's a furnace. The kids are running around in just their undershirts. Finn's cough already sounds better. And the hydroponics. Jax, tell him the hydroponics." Jax grinned, a wide, triumphant flash of teeth. "Automated feeding cycles, Cap. Full-spectrum grow lights. We're going to be swimming in nutrient paste in a few cycles. Maybe even fresh greens." A profound sense of awe washed over you, mixing with an unexpected, overwhelming wave of relief. The constant gnawing cold, the perpetual hunger, the endless struggle against dimness, for generations that had been your existence. And now, this warmth. It wasn't just physical. It was the heat of 100 breaths, 100 beating hearts, 100 stubborn souls refusing to give up. It was the warmth of hope, finally realized. You weren't just surviving anymore. You were, against all odds, starting to live. Truly live. The new light, bright and relentless, made every dust mote visible, every flicker of emotion on a face. It felt almost aggressive after centuries of comforting gloom. You felt the warmth of the habitat, a luxurious hum against your skin, but the air was thick with something else now. The chatter of 100 liberated voices, the clatter of tools being sorted, the shouts of children unburdened by the bitter cold. And beneath it all, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. The easy camaraderie of shared desperation was fading, replaced by the sharper edges of renewed personalities. You stood near the central communal table, now cleared of its usual repair components, watching the scene unfold. It had been mere cycles since Jax had brought the main Cathar conduit fully online, flooding your section of the ship with steady warmth and dazzling white light. The initial euphoria had been a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated relief. But as the frantic need for sheer survival receded, something else began to fill the void. Something distinctly, inevitably human. You watched as 2 crew members, Finn's mother Anya and a senior hydroponics engineer Kale, stood near the newly glowing nutrient vats. Their voices, once unified in hushed urgent planning, were now sharper, more defined. Anya gestured emphatically at a row of burgeoning algae tanks, her brow furrowed. "But Kale, the medical bay needs those proteins first," Anya insisted, her voice rising slightly above the general din. "The youngest are still recovering from the deep cold. Their systems need a boost, now that we have the resources." Kale crossed his arms, his expression unyielding, a fresh sheen of sweat on his forehead from the now comfortable temperature. "And the atmospheric scrubbers need maximum efficiency, Anya. Jax is demanding priority on the higher density algae for the filtration system. If that goes down, none of us breathe clean air. And if the air fails, the medical bay is pointless." You felt a familiar tightness in your chest. This wasn't malice. It was the inevitable friction of renewed potential, the sudden, overwhelming choices after so long without any. The shared enemy of cold and hunger had united them under a single, desperate banner. Now, with the hearth warm and the larder relatively fuller, the hearth's politics began. Everyone had a vital need, a compelling argument, and a sudden, passionate investment in the newfound abundance. You stepped forward, the sound of your boots on the clean metal deck attracting their attention. Their gazes, sharp with their separate priorities, turned to you, awaiting a judgment, a decision. The Cap, the one who had kept them awake, kept them alive, brought them to this incredible moment of triumph. The weight of that expectation, of the hundreds of lives relying on your judgment to navigate this new, complex landscape, pressed down on you like a physical force. "Anya, Kale," you began, your voice calm, authoritative, cutting through the rising tension, but not dismissing it. "Both points are valid. Both are vital. But we have to prioritize. And, more importantly, we have to asterisk talk. You gestured to a makeshift table, now just a plain, cold surface waiting to be claimed. We need a new system. A proper allocation council. Not just for this week, but for the next 100 years. This isn't just about immediate survival anymore. It's about how we build from here. It was the human way. Not just to survive, but to build, to organize, to argue, and then, hopefully, to compromise. The Kahar would have had a pre-programmed algorithm for resource distribution, cold and efficient, devoid of emotional input. You had people with fear and hope and needs, all clamoring for a piece of the newfound warmth and bounty. The success hadn't ended the struggle, it had merely shifted its battleground. The rasping cough, thin and wet, tore through the stagnant air, making the makeshift curtains around Lena's cot tremble. It wasn't a single cough, but a chorus, a low, persistent symphony of sickness that had become the new, terrifying backdrop to your existence. The air in the medical bay, once just recycled, now carried a distinct, acrid tang, the metallic scent of fever mingled with the faint, sweet smell of repurposed algae poultices. You pressed your palm to Lena's forehead. Her skin was burning, hot and dry, a terrifying contrast to the usual ambient coolness of the Cathar ship. The chill in your own stomach was pure, unadulterated fear. This wasn't the cold you could fight with tallow and blankets. This wasn't hunger you could defeat with scavenged protein. This was something unseen, insidious, spreading through your small, isolated community like a shadow. It had started subtly, with a few sniffles, then a fever, and now the hacking coughs, the constant aches, the weakness that stole even the strongest among you. Elara moved with a desperate efficiency, her face drawn, her movements quick but heavy with exhaustion. She wiped Lena's face with a damp cloth, her touch gentle. "It's spreading faster than I can track, Cap," she murmured, her voice tight, a hint of desperation in her tone. "The bioscanners Jax rigged are crude, but they show a viral agent, something highly mutable, nothing we've ever seen, and our antibiotics, the last of them, are useless." You felt the familiar surge of frustration, hot and bitter. The Cathar had no need for active immunology. Their stasis chambers were sterile cocoons, their biology perfectly preserved, untouched by the random mutations of active life. They never prepared for a disease outbreak, because they never expected to be awake. But you were. And now, your choice to live through the long night came with a brutal, unexpected cost. A groan came from the next cot, Jax. Even your brilliant, stubborn engineer had fallen prey. His usually booming voice was now a weak rattle. It's feeding on something in our nutrient paste, Cap," he rasped, struggling to sit up, then collapsing back onto the thin mattress. "A dormant culture. Reactivated. My fault. I should have sterilized deeper." You shook your head, the bitter taste of helplessness thick in your mouth. "No one's fault, Jax. We're doing the best we can with what we have." But the words felt hollow. What you had wasn't enough. You watched Lena shiver. Despite the heat of her fever, despite the new warmth in the habitat, her small body fought. But it was a battle against an invisible enemy, and you had no weapons. Suddenly a memory flashed. The Cathar's bizarre, multi-limbed healing pods, designed for tissue regeneration, for repairing stasis-induced atrophy. Could they be repurposed? Could their raw, alien energy fields be tuned to fight a virus? It was a long shot. A dangerous, completely untested gamble. But what other choice did you have? You looked at Elara, your eyes meeting hers. "Those Cathar regeneration pods in Sector Beta," you said, your voice firm, pushing back the fear. "Can you reconfigure the energy emitters? Reverse the polarity? Anything that might shock the virus out of their systems, without cooking the host?" Elara's eyes widened, a flicker of desperate hope mixed with profound skepticism. "It's incredibly risky, Cap. We could do more harm than good. A complete unknown." "We're a complete unknown, Elara," you countered, your voice low, steady, filled with the raw, unyielding will to survive. You looked at Lena, at Jax, at the rows of coughing, feverish faces. You didn't choose stasis. You chose this. This struggle. This fight. This impossible, messy, beautiful, terrible act of living. And you weren't about to let an alien cold, a microscopic enemy, take that choice away. The sickness in the straw might be deadly, but the fire in human hearts, you knew, could burn hotter than any fever. The cool, slick surface of the Cathar regeneration pod closed around you, sealing you in with a soft, hydraulic hiss. The air, once filled with the acrid tang of fever and the wet rasp of coughs, was suddenly sterile, almost too clean. You lay there, naked save for a thin alien fiber sheet, the sickness a burning inferno in your lungs, a hammer pounding behind your eyes. Your muscles ached with a deep systemic fatigue, making even the effort to swallow a monumental task. This was your last gamble. This was the bitter potion of a fever dream, concocted from desperate hope and alien tech. Ilara's voice, muffled through the thick, translucent lid, was tight with a barely contained fear. Cap! The energy readings are spiking. Jax is worried about cellular destabilization. We still don't know if this is going to heal you or cook you. Her words, meant as a warning, felt like a distant echo in the fog of your fever. You just closed your eyes, trusting her. Trusting Jax. Trusting that humanity, faced with extinction, would find a way, even if that way was through a terrifying alien machine. A faint hum began, low and resonant, vibrating through the pod's shell and into your very bones. It felt like a deep chord being struck, reverberating through every cell. Then came the warmth. Not a gentle heat, but an intense, almost invasive warmth that spread rapidly, seeming to reach into your deepest tissues, where the virus had taken root. It prickled, then burned, like 1,000 needles pricking your skin simultaneously. You bit back a groan, your teeth gritting. The hum intensified, rising in pitch, and a soft, internal glow pulsed through the pod's walls, bathing you in an unnerving, pale blue light. Your vision swam. Colors fractured. You felt disoriented, as if your internal compass had spun wildly out of control. Images flashed behind your eyes. Lena's small, feverish face. Jax, pale and fighting for breath. The vast, cold emptiness of the Cathar ship. The reasons you chose to stay awake. The reasons you lay here now, trusting this desperate, dangerous cure. A sharp, almost electrical jolt coursed through your body, making every muscle spasm. You gasped, a ragged, involuntary cry tearing from your throat, muffled by the pod. It felt like fire, then ice, then fire again, washing over you in waves. Your mind screamed for it to stop, for release from the agonizing assault, but deep down, a stubborn spark refused to break. This was the fight. This was what it meant to endure. This was what you signed up for when you refused the long sleep. Hold steady, Cap. Readings are stabilizing. It's working. Maybe. Ilara's voice, a lifeline, reached you through the haze. It's attacking the viral proteins, disrupting them. You didn't know how much longer you could take it. Your skin felt stretched, raw, your head pounding with the internal symphony of alien energy. Your lungs burned, but the incessant, rattling cough was, you noticed, slowly receding. The sharpest pains were dulling, replaced by a deep, weary ache. The fever, that relentless internal inferno, seemed to be receding, pulling back like a tide, leaving behind a cold, clammy sweat. Finally, with a soft, almost imperceptible click, the energy field subsided. The hum faded. The blue light dimmed. The pod's lid hissed open, revealing Ilara's anxious, tear-streaked face. She helped you sit up, her hand trembling as it touched your shoulder. You felt weak, drained, but the fire was gone, the cough was gone. The bitter taste of fever had been replaced by a faint metallic tang on your tongue. and the overwhelming, glorious taste of clean, cool air. You swung your legs out of the pod, feeling the cold metal floor against your feet. Your body protested, but you stood, swaying slightly, looking at your shaking hands. You had faced the sickness. You had faced the unknown, alien cure. And you had pushed through. The bitter potion had not been easy to swallow, nor to endure. The rhythmic, almost hypnotic scrape hiss of the repurposed Cathar stylus against the flexible, almost paper-thin data vellum was the most profound sound in your dimly lit corner of the archives. It wasn't paper, not really. It was a salvaged, ancient Cathar data screen, meticulously stripped, treated, and reconfigured by jacks to accept an analog input, leaving a faint, permanent etching with each stroke. The ink was a dense, rich pigment coaxed from the processed alien algae, smelling faintly earthy, almost like real soil. You leaned closer to the focused beam of light from your headlamp, your brow furrowed in concentration, meticulously inscribing the story of the frozen river expedition, the alien beast, and the narrow escape. This was your journal, your history, humanity's chronicle in the long, dark journey. Your fingers, still bearing the faint scars of frostbite from the deep cold of Sector Omega, moved with practiced grace, despite their stiffness. Each letter was a small act of defiance, a tangible proof that you weren't just surviving, you were remembering, you were recording. The Cathar had their vast, sterile data crystals, storing eons of information, cold and inaccessible, meant for silent retrieval after their long sleep. But you had chosen to stay awake, to live, to learn, and to asterisk write. A small hand reached out, gently touching the edge of the data vellum. It was Lena, her eyes wide with curiosity, peering over your shoulder. Her cough, thank the void for Alara's desperate ingenuity, was long gone. She pointed to a crude sketch you'd made of the multi-limbed creature. "Is that the ice beast, Cap?" she whispered, her voice soft. "The one that almost got you and Auntie Alara?" You nodded, a ghost of a smile touching your lips. "That's him. Frozen solid now, thanks to Auntie Alara's quick thinking. But he was a tough one. Made us remember that even a sleeping ship can have hungry shadows." You paused, dipping your stylus in the improvised ink pot, a small, polished Cathar nutrient sphere. "And that's why we write these stories, Lena. So you and your children will know what we faced, what we learned." The subtle vibration from the ship's newly stable power core, a comforting, steady hum, underscored the quiet. It was a reminder of how far you'd come. From the tyranny of tallow and freezing fingers, to the luxury of focused light and a constant supply of ink. Yet even with all these advances, the act of writing, the deliberate physical creation of a record, felt profoundly necessary. The lessons you wrote weren't just about engineering or resource management or even alien viruses. They were about resilience. About the raw human instinct to push forward, to adapt, to invent when there was no other choice. They were about the courage to face the unknown, to fight, to grieve, and then to keep building, brick by painful brick, a future that the Cathar would never comprehend. They simply stored data. You were forging a living, breathing history. You carefully finished the last sentence of the entry, then gently rolled the flexible sheet, placing it into a scavenged Cathar data cylinder, now meticulously relabeled for human archives. It would be stored, cherished, passed down. This wasn't just a physical record. It was a cultural lifeline, connecting past struggles to future generations. The scrape of a quill on vellum, you realized, was the sound of humanity refusing to be forgotten. It was the sound of a story that demanded to be told, centuries in the making, and still, defiantly, being written. The chill radiated from the massive, smooth obsidian monolith, seeping into your boots, up your legs, and deep into your very core. It was a different kind of cold than the ship's ambient temperature, an ancient, profound cold, as if the stone itself remembered the birth of stars and the death of suns. You ran your hand over its impossibly smooth surface, the alien glyphs etched into its face glowing faintly under your headlamp beam, cold and indifferent to your touch. This was the Chamber of Whispers, another of the Cathar's desolate monuments discovered deep in the ship's forgotten sectors. A place where their final thoughts, their purpose, seemed to resonate, frozen in time. Ilara stood beside you, her breath pluming, a hand resting lightly on your arm, her presence a small, vital warmth against the overwhelming chill. Jax, despite his gruff exterior, stood quietly, his headlamp illuminating a small, almost reverent circle of light around a complex Cathar console near the monolith. Even Lena, wrapped in her thick, patched thermal blanket, stood patiently, her small hand holding tight to her mother Anya's. A solemnity had fallen over your small group, a quiet awe in the face of such ancient, alien grandeur. For generations after you chose to stay awake, these deep dives into Cathar territory weren't just about scavenging. They became pilgrimage, a way to understand your silent hosts, and perhaps to remind yourselves of the stubborn human heartbeat in this dead universe. Ilara cleared her throat, her voice hushed. They believed this monolith was a universal record, she whispered, a final message to anyone who would find them. After their long sleep, Jax grunted. A message we're probably not meant to read without their specific neural interfaces, or millennia of study. But Lena, her eyes wide, had a different question. Will our stories be here too, Cap? After we're gone? You knelt, one hand still pressed to the cold, smooth stone. The chill seeped through your glove, a deep, pervasive cold. You looked up at Lena, her innocent question echoing the vastness of your journey, your defiance. Not on asterisks their records, Lena, you said, your voice resonating in the quiet chamber, but on ours, in our songs, in our stories, and in how we remember them. You looked around at the faces of your people, their breath pluming, their eyes reflecting the flickering light. Then, without a word, you began to hum. A low, soft melody, an old earth folk tune, passed down through generations. Ilara joined you, her voice a harmony, followed by Anya, then Jax, their voices weaving together, a fragile, beautiful human sound, pushing against the profound, alien silence. Lena, emboldened, started humming too, her tiny voice a sweet, pure note. It wasn't a Cathar prayer, it was a human one. A simple act of making noise, of feeling, of living, of defying the stone's cold indifference. The ancient monolith stood impassive, absorbing the human sound, untouched. But you felt it. The warmth generated by that collective human voice, that shared breath, was more potent than any heater. It wasn't just a sound, it was a testament. A stark, undeniable presence against the cold, vast emptiness of the sleeping ship. You were not just awake, you were points alive. And in that moment, as your voices filled the dead air, you understood the profound, defiant power of a prayer against the stone's cold, forged by a humanity that simply refused to hibernate. The steady drip, drip, drip echoed through the vast Cathar chamber, amplified by the sudden, unnerving silence. It wasn't a single drip, but a symphony of countless tiny splashes, like an invisible rain beginning to fall deep within the ship's metal bones. You felt it first, a subtle slickness under your boots where yesterday had been hard, unforgiving ice. The air, once sharp and frigid, now carried a new, damp chill, heavy with the scent of stagnant water and something vaguely metallic, like old rust blooming. The glorious, powerful hum from Jax's reactivated conduit, once a symbol of triumph, suddenly felt different. It pulsed with a warmer resonance, a subtle increase in ambient temperature across the ship. And now, the thaw. Your heart gave a slow, apprehensive beat. This wasn't the natural process of a planet's spring. This was an alien vessel, a meticulously engineered environment now slowly, inexorably, belting around you. What was a welcome warmth in the habitat was becoming a treacherous enemy in the unexplored reaches. Cap, you seeing this? Ilara's voice, sharp with concern, crackled over the comms. She was ahead, near the entrance to Sector Zeta, a section they had recently ventured into, a maze of ancient, frozen hydroponic systems. The ice bridges, they're softening. and the water pressure is building in the lower conduits. You ran a gloved hand over a previously frozen bulkhead. It was slick with condensation, tiny rivulets tracing paths down its surface. The magnificent crystalline formations, the snowy wood you'd once navigated, were weeping. Large sheets of rime detached from overhead, falling with soft floods into growing puddles. The sheer volume of water was alarming. It flowed, sluggishly at first, then gathered speed, becoming small, dark streams snaking through the metal corridors, seeking every crack, every weak point. "Jax, what's your diagnostic on the thaw?" you demanded, the cold dread starting to creep up your spine. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a fundamental shift, and a dangerous one. A pause, then Jax's voice, heavy with unexpected news. "It's the power cap. The main conduit is radiating a higher heat signature than anticipated. Enough to warm the outer hull sections. It's melting everything." Slowly, relentlessly, he sighed, a tired, frustrated sound. The Cathar never designed for a living crew to warm their ship to this degree during a long journey. Their internal systems are failing to cope with the increased liquid flow. The truth hit you like a blast of cold air. Your success was breeding a new, unexpected crisis. The warmth you'd fought so hard for, the lifeline that had brought them back from the brink, was now actively undermining the very structure that sheltered them. The thaw, meant to be a blessing, was a deceptive promise. A sudden, sharp sousibing the coop echoed, closer this time, followed by a metallic groan that reverberated through the very deck you stood on. A section of wall, previously reinforced by a thick sheet of ice, buckled inward, releasing a torrent of muddy, stagnant water. The reek of decaying organic matter, trapped for centuries, was nauseating. "We've got a breach," Alara yelled. "The old bio-waste system. It's overflowing." You plunged your hand into the icy, murky water, feeling the powerful current dragging at your boots. Your thermal gear, designed for dry cold, was no match for this. Your clothes clung to you, heavy and cold, sucking the warmth from your body. This was a new kind of terror, a slow drowning in the very vessel that was meant to carry them to a new home. You looked at the endless, dripping corridors, the treacherous puddles, and the looming threat of structural collapse. The Cathar slept through the centuries, their ship a stable, frozen tomb. You chose to be awake, and now you had to fight the melting tomb too. The hollow, gnawing ache in your stomach was no longer a distant memory of harder times. It was a persistent, demanding presence, a cold knot tightening with each passing cycle. You could taste it, a metallic, almost sour flavor that clung to your tongue, an unwelcome ghost of true hunger returning to your thriving habitat. The air, once vibrant with the earthy scent of growing algae and the fresh tang of chlorophyll, now carried a distinct, sickly sweet odor of decay, mingled with the pervasive, damp chill that seeped in from the ship's thawing lower decks. The brilliant, white grow lights of the hydroponics bays, once a beacon of abundance, now cast an eerie glow over rows of struggling, brown-tinged plants. "Another 5 units lost in Bay Gamma Cap," Ilara reported, her voice flat, devoid of its usual energy. She stood by the nutrient vats, her gaze fixed on the wilting growth, her own face etched with a familiar weariness you saw reflected in every mirror. "The fungal bloom from the bio-waste breach spread. We've quarantined it, but the yield is down by almost 40%, and the filtration systems are barely coping with the particulates." You pressed your lips together, the familiar dryness a constant companion. The thaw, meant to be a minor structural challenge, had become a direct assault on your most precious resource: food. The rising water levels from the melting ice had flooded critical sections, carrying ancient contaminants and alien spores from the Cathar's neglected systems directly into your meticulously maintained hydroponics. The warmth you'd fought for, the very success that had saved you from the cold, was now an engine of a new kind of scarcity. A child's whimper drifted from the nearby communal area. Little thin. You knew the sound. It was the soft, embarrassed cry of a child fighting hunger, trying to be brave. The daily rations, once meager but sufficient, were now stretched even thinner, a translucent paste that only mocked the empty space in your gut. You could see the gauntness returning to faces, the quick tempers flaring, the subtle anxiety in every conversation about the next meal. The politics of the hearth had dissolved back into the primal desperation for sustenance. Jax appeared, his usually booming voice a quiet rumble. He held a small, desiccated alien growth pulled from a deep, unexplored corridor. Found this. Low toxicity reading. It's not much, but I think I can synthesize something from it. If we can't grow it, we'll break down whatever else is on this damn ship. He held it up, a symbol of desperate ingenuity, a tiny, fibrous promise against the overwhelming emptiness. It'll taste like rust, probably, but it's something. You looked at the alien plant, then back at the struggling hydroponics. The gnawing ache in your gut was a constant reminder, a demanding whisper of a looming crisis. But then you saw the determination in Jax's eyes, the unwavering resolve in Alara's stance as she began to adjust the failing filters once more. This wasn't about giving up. This was about finding another way. Because humanity didn't just hibernate to endure. It stayed awake, and when faced with starvation, it would eat rust, it would eat alien muck. It would chew through steel if it had to. The hunger was real, sharp, and terrifying. But so was the stubborn, unyielding will to fill that void. No matter the cost, no matter the taste, the rich, loamy scent of damp earth, almost too primal to comprehend, hit you first. A shock to senses long accustomed to stale metal, recycled algae, and the faint, ever-present tang of ozone. It was a smell so profoundly yours time to Kindred that for a moment you swore you could feel sun on your face, hear the distant buzz of insects. Your breath hitched, and you found yourself taking a deep, shuddering inhale, trying to fill your lungs with this impossible, forgotten fragrance. This wasn't a memory. This was real. It was emanating from the newly sealed-off Biochamber Gamma, a repurposed Cathar waste reclamation unit that Jax had been tinkering with for cycles. You pushed through the newly installed makeshift airlock, the hum of the Cathar power conduit now sounding like a distant, benevolent purr. The sight inside stole your breath. Rows of glowing, full-spectrum lights, meticulously scavenged and rewired, bathed a series of shallow, trough-like beds. And in those beds, not hydroponic nutrient paste, but talmic soil. Dark, granular, smelling gloriously of life. And from it, tender green shoots were emerging, pushing upwards with a vibrant, defiant energy. Not just algae, but actual plants. Small, leafy greens. Cap, you just gonna stand there and smell the dirt all day? Jax's voice, now restored to its booming self, cut through your stunned silence. He wiped sweat from his brow with a greasy rag, a wide, triumphant grin splitting his face. Figured out how to recalibrate their molecular reconstructors. Took the fungal bloom's composted remains, added some mineral deposits from Sector Zeta, and, well, he gestured proudly at the burgeoning green sprouts. Turns out Cathar biowaste, properly processed, makes for excellent terrestrial growing medium. You walked forward, slowly, almost reverently. You knelt beside one of the troughs, reaching out a hesitant finger. The soil was warm, slightly damp, yielding softly to your touch. It felt utterly alien, yet profoundly familiar. It was the antithesis of the cold, sterile metal ship. It was life, born from death and waste, born from human ingenuity and sheer, stubborn will. Ilara joined you, her eyes wide, a rare, soft smile on her lips. She plucked a tiny, delicate leaf, carefully brushing away a speck of dirt. "It's real, Cap," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She held it to her nose, inhaling deeply. "It smells like hope." The gnawing ache in your stomach, a constant companion since the hunger gap, seemed to loosen its grip, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated awe. This wasn't just sustenance. This was a victory over the very nature of their confinement. The Cathar had designed a closed system for inert existence. You had redesigned it for active, thriving life. You had, literally, made soil from nothing. "How long until harvest?" you asked, your voice a little husky. Jax chuckled. "A few cycles for the first round of greens. Enough to make a real dent in the rations. And the rotation system means we'll have a continuous supply. The fungal bloom tried to kill us. Now it's feeding us." He looked at you, his grin unshakable. "Turns out, You just gotta know how to ask the universe for what you need. You stood, your hand still smelling of damp, reborn earth. This wasn't just a solution to the hunger crisis. It was a testament. A stark, undeniable proof that humanity didn't just endure the long night. It actively reshaped it, breathed life into its dead corners, and cultivated hope even in the most sterile of alien environments. The Cathar slept through the centuries, their ship a meticulously preserved static container. But you were awake. And you were planting seeds. The warmth hit you first, not the ambient heat of the habitat, nor the focused glow of a workstation lamp, but a profound, radiant heat that soaked into your skin, chasing away the last vestiges of the ship's centuries-long chill. It felt like a memory resurrected, a sensation so visceral, so utterly earth that your breath hitched in your throat. You closed your eyes, feeling the gentle caress on your face, the almost unbearable brightness behind your eyelids, before slowly, reverently, opening them again. Before you, through the massive, repurposed Cathar view screen, was a panorama of pure, unadulterated light. Not the cold, sterile light of the stars, nor the stark white of your habitat's lamps, but a dynamic, golden-orange glow that shifted, deepened, and intensified with breathtaking realism. It pulsed with the vibrant, life-giving spectrum of a rising sun. After decades, shifty taking centuries of perpetual twilight and artificial light, you were looking at a simulated dawn, and it felt utterly, gloriously real. Ilara stood beside you, her shoulders trembling, a single tear tracing a clean path through the grime on her cheek. "Jax, he did it," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "He rerouted the core energy through the main observation array, calibrated the optical frequencies. He built us a sun." The awe was palpable, a shared, silent reverence that filled the once-dead observation deck, now flooded with this miraculous light. The children, those who had never known a sky, stood mesmerized, their small faces bathed in the golden glow, their eyes wide with a wonder that transcended their understanding. Little Lena, her hand clutching her mother's, pointed a trembling finger at the simulated light. "Mama, is that home?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. And in that moment, for you it was. You could almost feel the breeze, smell the dew on green grass. The scent of the damp earth from your newly successful biochambers, now carried by the circulating air, seemed to intensify, marrying perfectly with the visual illusion. It was a synthesis of all your struggles, all your desperate ingenuity. The endless cold, the gnawing hunger, the terrifying sickness, the physical pain of rebuilding and re-engineering, all of it had led to this. To this single, breathtaking moment of artificial yet utterly profound sunlight. Jax, looking impossibly tired but standing taller than ever, walked up beside you. He didn't say anything, just clapped a hand on your shoulder, his gaze fixed on the simulated sun. The hum of the Cathar power conduit, repurposed and now singing with life, resonated through the deck beneath your feet, not just as power, but as a symphony of human will. You felt a warmth spread through your chest, deeper than the light on your skin, stronger than any triumph you'd felt before. It wasn't just physical warmth. It was the warmth of raw, defiant hope. The Cathar had offered you stasis, a quiet frozen passage through the void, a slumber that would end with a new dawn. You had refused. You had chosen to stay awake, to fight every inch of the way, to carve out your own living path through the centuries. And now, here you stood, not just surviving, not just enduring, but creating a sun, making a home, planting seeds, telling stories, and holding on to the fierce, stubborn, beautiful truth that even in the darkest, most alien corners of the universe, humanity would always find a way to bring its own light. You felt the sun on your skin, a beacon against the infinite dark, and in that moment, you knew, truly knew, that the long journey was far from over, but humanity, awake and alive, was ready for whatever came next.